When walking through the Big Cypress Preserve of South Central Florida, you are not alone. Inch by inch, step by step, the vegetation changes. You can have a foot in a dry pineland 1 second and get your feet wet in a prairie the next step before crossing over into a cypress dome. Pine and cypress trees blur together, a marriage of dry and wet. Ownership of this sprawling system of forests, prairies, and wetlands is defined by the straight lines we see on maps. But in the interconnected world of the Big Cypress, there is another kind of border.
Nature's border. Nature's border appears, disappears, then repeats across the landscape. From leaves to needles to grass, wet to dry, burned to unburned, temperate to tropical. Here, at the tip of this southbound peninsula, a complicated tapestry of fire-adapted vegetation is draped across 3/4 million acres within the borders of Big Cypress National Preserve.
The canopies of the cypress trees give the appearance of tiny rolling hills. They are not. The swamp is a place of surprise and deception.
The slopes you thought might be hills change by only a few feet in elevation. The pinelands and hammocks take the high ground.
Cypress and prairie take the low ground.
How does fire burn in a swamp? The answer is written on the land. To read this story, one must get to know the place and the language of fire.
Underneath the fire swamp, we find the most solid border, limestone. Limestone lays under all living things here, even though you cannot always see it, jutting out from the pineland. Look inside the cross-cut canals, bisecting the Big Cypress to see the impressive stone. Even then, we do not see the limestone for what it is. In 3 words, it is ancient marine life. Limestone from ancient sea creatures is the foundation of the fire swamp. A shallow sea was here, the Okeechobee Sea. For over 40 million years, this shallow sea looked much like modern Florida Bay. The corals, whelks, and clams from those once warm, shallow waters are right there under your feet. As sea levels rose and fell 21 times over 40 million years, the calcium carbonate remains of sea creatures and algae formed sedimentary limestone bedrock. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium. Once alive in a salty sea, now bleached white by time as undulating depressions and depositions under a freshwater swamp that came to be just 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Tree roots grow into tiny cracks through the limestone. Summer rain slowly dissolves the soft rock. The Big Cypress watershed today is a rain-fed system. Rain is the only thing left. In the decades before the establishment of Big Cypress National Preserve, drainage works disconnected the swamp from its historic northern Everglades headwaters. Canals now drain the historic headwaters around, not through the swamp. Those headwaters once included Lake Okeechobee, the Everglades, a Calacoochee Slough, and even the Caloosahatchee River. Today, rainwater and cypress rule on this undulating limestone with alternating pinelands, prairies, and hammocks.
The tradition of burning the borders of the swamp is carried forward from the past. From when Big Cypress looked like the Big Cypress we now know, Native Americans lived here. Walking on this limestone, paddling and fishing the waters, hunting, collecting plants, and burning. Fire managers today burn more for ecological survival than human survival. After a fire passes through the prairie, the effects are spectacular. The fire-blackened prairie comes alive, awash in life-giving chlorophyll. These burned areas are the most productive. Florida panthers and deer use the recently burned prairies and pinelands to forage and hunt. The deer feed on the fresh shoots and grasses, and the panthers use the burned areas for hunting and travel. The unburned areas are for hiding and denning, places to hunt, places to hide. Deborah Jansen calls this the mosaic, referring to the art made of irregular pieces of tile.
Behind me is an example of a very good prescribed burn that was done just a couple months ago. The key aspect of Big Cypress that makes it beneficial to not only just panthers and deer, but all the other species, is the fact that it's a mosaic of habitats. And in order to maintain this mosaic, fire is important. Fire is, in fact, necessary.
Fire managers create this mosaic by understanding the physics and behavior of fire along the boundaries of the wet and dry areas. The physics of fire tell us that when a larger fire is near, smaller fires are drawn to the larger. Fire does not like to be alone. With time, one fire will embrace another fire, becoming a larger one. Fire flows between the prairies and pinelands. Both the live and the dead plants burn. Leaves, needles, grasses, standing dead trees, fallen logs, and even the organic soil all become fuel for the fire. Fire moves slowly across the ground. The wind is quiet and the ground is wet. Night burning takes advantage of cooler air and less wind. Fire moves faster during dry and windy days. If pushed by wind, fire may skip over the plants holding more water in their leafy tissue. They are too moist to burn. Same with depressions in the ground, dug by animals or from trees uprooted by hurricanes. This interplay between fire, weather, and land creates borders within borders. Predator and prey ever mindful of crossing these borders.
Every summer, the sawgrass prairies bloom red, heralding the onset of the wet season. Summer wet season delivers more than mosquitoes. Thunderstorms are fantastic and terrifying. Summer rains seep through the ancient marine fossils and underground into the Big Cypress aquifer. When rain fills up the underground aquifer, water overflows into the surrounding cypress, prairies, and even the pinelands. The aquatic community of fish, birds, and algae thrive in the seasonally wet prairie. With subtropical sunshine and plenty of water, life flourishes. Plants get more and more decadent, peaking with the fall grass blooms. Then, the subtropical storm shut down. Summer wet season crosses over into winter dry season. The prairie and cypress borders dry out like wet clothes hung out on a windy hot day. Water becomes more and more precious, holding out in those ancient marine dips and depressions throughout the swamp. The border between life and death grows thin during the dry season, especially for aquatic life. All of the green up after past fires fades into a heap of browns and yellows. And then, when the swamp looks least like a swamp, the summer wet season begins again. Sawgrass blooms, the sky thunders, water overflows, the plants grow. If fire does not come soon, then this happens. This overgrown prairie has not burned for 8 years.
Sawgrass, dead sawgrass, litter.
Megan and Jill are fire ecologists.
Brazilian pepper.
They return to the same study plots every year to measure plant responses to fire. No fire? Then no prairie. Prairies are gradually overrun by shrubs who thrive in the fire-free periods. The prairie becomes a hardwood hammock. Sun-loving plants struggle in the shade. So will the wildlife that lives in the open habitat. In the swamp, the fire shed improves the watershed by burning up thick, dead vegetation. Fire blazes a path of least resistance for water and wildlife. Lightning from thunderstorms can ignite fire in the swamp, especially during the transition between dry season and wet season. Later in the wet season, lightning-ignited fires often get rained out by the same thunderstorm that sparked the flames to life. By far, people do most of the burning in the fire swamp. This has been true since humans first appeared thousands of years ago. Letting fire loose in the swamp is hard work. These highly trained firefighters, managers, and ecologists bear all the risks and responsibilities to keep the fire-adapted prairies and pinelands vibrant.
Pineland has a come here, go away relationship with fire. The South Florida slash pine trees both carry fire and resist fire at the same time. Fallen, dry pine needles soaked with resins and oils carry fire through the pineland, while mixing with more volatile saw palmettos, cabbage palms, and myrtle oaks. Still attached to the tree, long green pine needles contain enough water in their tissue to protect the sensitive growth buds they surround from fire. When flames try to crawl up the pine tree trunk, paper-like sheets of bark peel off and fall away. Frequent flames burn the lowest branches off. This keeps fire from climbing into the canopy and killing the tree. This is how the pine tree survives. The trees have adapted to fire. When fire burns across the pineland, shrubs are top-killed. They are trimmed back, pruned by flames. Out of the newly nourished soil, with more sunlight and moisture, an armada of plant and insect diversity returns. So do pine seedlings. In this way, the forest lives on. Shrubs survive fire by resprouting from storage organs just a few inches under the ground. Other plants do not survive fire. Instead, these plants regenerate from seeds stored in the soil. Without fire, the shrubby undergrowth becomes overgrowth, transforming a pineland into a hardwood hammock, just like the prairie. A fire-maintained pineland is home to lots of wildlife. Big Cypress biologists revealed the Big Cypress fox squirrel lives and nests inside domes, but forages in recently burned pinelands. These animals find more food to eat and move better through a fire-maintained pineland. There is another fire ambassador here, rare and seldom seen, unless you know where to look and how to listen.
I started at the end of 2014 working with bonneted bats. We saw an immediate increase in bonneted bat activity after the fires. Bonneted bats seem to be responding to a moderately burned frequency of 3 to 5 years. They likely are feeding on beetles, and beetles are oftentimes attracted to recently burned areas. These are big bats, but they're really docile, which is one thing that I really love about them.
Pinelands need fire, but not too much fire. High-intensity fires and too much fire can kill the next generation of young pines, threaten old growth nest trees of red-cockaded woodpeckers, and burn up valuable pine snags used by bats, birds, and other animals. Fire managers must strike a balance between too much fire and too little fire to support the diverse pineland community.
Under the cypress dome, succulent air plants without fire resistance flourish on cypress trees with fire resistance. Fire may burn freely across the pinelands and prairies, only to extinguish at the cypress border. In these forested wetlands, there is a built-in fire border. The alligator knows this. A cypress dome grows around holes in the limestone that fill like ponds. The pond center has the deepest water, the most nutrients, and no surprise, the tallest cypress trees. Cypress roots pierce the limestone, further deepening the hole. Alligators also play their part, scraping out peat soil out of the pond center. The deeper the pond center, the longer water remains under the dome. Waist-deep water will stop fire well outside the dome's edge. Even during the dry season, fire crawls to a stop at the dome's damp edge. Cypress trees throughout the dome wick water from the pond center and peat soil to stay hydrated year-round. Some dry seasons, when leaves are parched and soil is dry, fire eats into the dome. Here in the fire swamp, cypress is ready. Like pine needles, dry cypress needles carry fire. High water levels keep cypress undergrowth unimpressive. This keeps fire low and unimpressive. Thick, peely cypress bark deflects the creeping fires. In this dome, the fire made it all the way to the pond center before retiring. deep-rooted cypress trees will resprout. These days, Big Cypress has more severe droughts than ever before because the rain-driven watershed is disconnected from historic headwaters. Water flows are now 2 to 3 times less than the recent past. During a severe drought, the dome's built-in fire border can vanish. The smoldering can go on for days or weeks, slowly burning the organic matter like hot charcoal. Burning organic soils can deepen the center pond, but only to a point. Beyond that, cypress may not return. The swamp can survive these severe ground fires because, like so much here, what is a loss to one species is a gain for others.
Hardwood hammocks provide the most shade in the fire swamp. Inside the shady hammock borders, animals take refuge from brutal summer heat, storms, and fire in the surrounding fire-loving swamp. Here, fire burns on the outside, but rarely on the inside. Tree snails are full-time residents in this fire refuge. Moist and soft-bodied with their pretty shell armor, snails do not tolerate fire. Walking through a hammock feels like an earthy trampoline. The ground, spongy. These thick layers of organic soil with exceptional water retention can only accumulate in the absence of fire. Hardwood hammocks grow on elevated limestone or just their own elevated soil. Fire carriers, like palmettos, grasses, and dry pine needles, are nowhere to be found inside the dark hammock. Outside the hammock is a different story. Like the cypress, fire burns the edges, reinforcing the hammock border. Fire becomes a flaming border fence, corralling hammock plants. If fire finds a way to cross into the dark hammock during severe drought or swamp drainage, these big canopy trees have some fire protection with deep roots. But like the cypress swamp, this organic peat soil can smolder for days. That is, until the wet season rains return and the sawgrass blooms.
Down here in the Big Cypress, the balance of fire and water creates an exquisite mosaic of beauty.
The borders between fire,
Water,
limestone,
people
plants, and animals
make this fire swamp
a home.